countries, Libya, Iraq, whoever the latest enemy happens to be.
All the crazy people we don't like.
And who aren't us. But I think
Exactly.
it's a very important to recognize that we have our crazies too. And the Soviet Union has its crazies too. And no one is able to predict the short-term, much less long-term future of these two countries. And since they have the vast predominance of the nuclear weapons on the planet, those two nations are the greatest danger.
And the existence of the weapons means that Boris Yeltsin's second cousin might actually become responsible for them.
Or
George Bush. Neil
That's
Bush could have the...
something like speaking allegorically, but nevertheless, that's right. And
if they weren't around, we wouldn't have this problem.
Precisely right. And because the relations between the United States and the Soviet Union are so much better now, because the Soviets have made it so clear that they would like to reduce the arsenal factor, this is the right time to do that. And the recalcitrant partner is not the Soviet Union, it's the United States. We are unwilling to get rid of our weapons on any significant scale. If everything goes well, the START Treaty, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, will, if it's implemented, will reduce the strategic arsenals by 30% and the tactical arsenals by nothing. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not nearly how much we have to do. We should be reducing these arsenals by 99%. Then you could still have a residual capability to preserve deterrence. That is to have enough weapons so that nobody in their right mind would attack you, because you can wipe out any country on earth. But still, if the worst happens, there would be not enough weapons in the world to cause nuclear winter. That's where we ought to get, in our opinion.
We'll come back in a moment and talk about why the arsenals of nuclear weapons aren't actually being reduced, and what are the reasons and rationales, and discuss the Persian Gulf a little bit with astronomer Carl Sagan when Night Watch continues. Our guest is astronomer Carl Sagan, co-author of A Path Where No Man Thought, a book describing the scenario of nuclear winter. A quote from a Greek playwright, A Path Where No Man Thought, referring to total disarmament or to nuclear winter, or both.
Well, what the playwright had in mind was, it's very interesting. It's from the play the Medea. Is that Zeus, the king of the gods, has stored in heaven various dooms for the human species, and that unexpectedly, unexpected by any human, there is a way out of the dooms, path where no man thought. So the book, I mean, certainly is grounded in a very sober and worrisome reality, but it argues that the existence of nuclear winter, one, provides a powerful motivation to get these arsenals down to manageable levels, and two, provides clear guidance as to what levels we should get down to and which weapon systems we should get rid of in what order.
Mm-hmm. In terms of whatever input you might have to policymakers, and you described a moment ago the fact that U.S. policy is not to destroy weapons unilaterally, not to reduce arsenals unilaterally,
or even bilaterally,
or even bilaterally.
Well, this goes into psychiatric issues in my view. That's what I think.
We have our crazies.
Not just crazies. We all grow up, especially boys, in a sort of schoolyard antagonism context, in which there's no such thing as having too many weapons. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. We used to have snowball fights. You rapidly learned that there was no such thing as too many snowballs, because there you'd be trying to pack your snowball when your better prepared opponent would be standing over you, pummeling you with his snowballs. But nuclear weapons are not snowballs. That's at least one of the problems. Any politician arguing we need more nuclear weapons to be strong has an easy path. Any politician saying...
Not so much today, though.
Well, even so, or at least any politician who says we should get rid of our weapons is vulnerable to the countercharge from his opponent, oh, you want to weaken the United States. It's at a very superficial level of engagement with the actual issues and with what the actual capability of the weapons. And so politicians having as their main, sometimes their only objective to be reelected, go in the path of least resistance. That's part of it. Another part of it is the perception that a vast and obscene number of nuclear weapons will make other nations toe the line. They'll take us more seriously. They'll do what we ask. We don't have to threaten them. The mere existence of those weapons on our ships, paying courtesy calls to foreign ports and all of that, provides a kind of subtle intimidation. And both the United States and the Soviet Union have been uh, adept at using that degree of coercion. And as the two countries continue their decline, economically and in other ways, the appeal of having an obscene number of nuclear weapons might in fact grow. You think it might? Yeah. There's also the fact that there are people whose lives, whose professional careers are involved with nuclear weapons, building them, storing them, preparing for their use, devising strategies, and they would be bereft of their life's work.
Now, some have charged that you have something of a livelihood stake in the nuclear winter theory, and that here you are trying to keep this alive. I mean, you've spent all this time on this research at a time when the political situation was very, very different, and here, you know, even though for some, perhaps in the policymaking realm, it's irrelevant to talk about this scenario now, you're trying to keep it alive simply to, keep an argument going.
If there's no argument here, if there's nothing to worry about, get rid of those weapons and I'll shut up. But, I mean, from my own point of view, this all started out in the study of dust storms on Mars, as remote from any political concern as you could imagine. In studying those dust storms, we developed slowly the technique for determining what the climate consequences of fine particles in the atmosphere are. And eventually, a decade after we started that, we weren't in any hurry, which we had been. We finally calculated what nuclear winter, what the nuclear effects would be, and they were devastating. And I'm a scientist. I'm a citizen of a democracy. I'm a father and a grandfather. I feel if I happen to be in the position of finding this thing, when the military establishments never discovered it in 38 years, I have an obligation to speak out.
Somewhat alarming. To know that you're the only one in the possession of this information that you think they should have been studying.
Their job is to know the effects of nuclear weapons, and the Russians. How come they didn't?
Before we run out of time in this segment, what do you think of the Persian Gulf? You mentioned that the U.S. has nuclear weapons in some of its ships, and some of those ships are presumed to be in the Persian Gulf right now with nuclear weapons stored below. Certainly, there is talk that the Bush administration has ruled out the use of nuclear weapons in a scenario like the Persian Gulf. What's your view of the Persian Gulf war going nuclear?
Well, clearly, there's nothing to worry about from Iraq. I mean, the big debate about Iraq is whether it might, in only a few years, have one nuclear weapon. So that's not going to make it.
It would make that nuclear weapon. It'd have to put all of its plutonium in a U-Haul truck and shoot it into space and hit another ball.
No, it would be so big they couldn't even launch it. So this is a red herring about the nuclear capability of Iraq, just like the jobs issue and the democracy issue for the medieval fiefdom of Kuwait. Those are all smokescreens. What it's really about is oil. That's a whole other issue.
But in terms of nuclear,
of nuclear winter, the clear worry is Israel. Israel, we learned from Mordecai Vanunu, who was in jail for decades for revealing this, has between 100 and 200 nuclear weapons. And if they were deployed in the cities and all facilities of the Near East exploded, they could make perhaps not a global nuclear winter, but a significant climate effect. And despite what the president says about nuclear weapons having been ruled out, in the actual conflicts, in the actual activities, is it so clear that the president can control what happens? How reliable are the permissive action links? Navy ships don't have permissive action links. These are the encoding devices that are supposed to prevent unauthorized or accidental use of nuclear weapons. But the Navy doesn't have PALs, just the Air Force and the Army. I think there's a considerable amount to worry about here.
When we come back, a discussion of what it's like to study dust storms on Mars. Our conversation with astronomer Carl Sagan continues. When Night What continues in a moment. Astronomer Carl Sagan is with us. You are an astronomer at Cornell.
Professor of astronomy.
That's right. Now, this is a profession that is near and dear to my heart, even though
yes?
I'm a scientific failure. But I had some designs of being a mathematician at some point. But I've got to figure there was a time in Carl Sagan's existence when he first looked through a telescope and jumped up and down with glee, and I'd be. If you could share that with me now, I'd just be tickled.
It was all pre-telescopes, just naked eye. I mean, as I said before, I grew up in Brooklyn, and even in Brooklyn in those days, you could occasionally see the stars.
Only occasionally.
Right.
I live in Brooklyn now. There's no stars. There are no heavens, no Orion, nothing.
But what happened? I knew my neighborhood intimately. I was a street kid. With my parents, of course, but I spent a lot of time on the streets, even at a young age, and I knew it intimately. And the stars seemed to me different. They weren't like the rest of the neighborhood. It's hard to explain, but so I asked people what they were. I mean, I asked other kids what they were. And older kids gave me an answer like this. They said, "They're lights in the sky, kid." Well, I could tell there were lights in the sky, but what were they? I mean, little bulbs on cords hanging from some electric socket up in the sky. What was it? Nobody knew. And I couldn't believe that.
Nobody even said, by that one there, Polaris, you can get to Queens.
Well,
nobody.
No, nobody knowing the name of a star. No, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
No, nobody said that. So I was 5 or 6 or something like that. I had my first library. And I went to the library and asked for a book on stars. And after some confusion, they gave me a book with Veronica Lake and Alan Ladd. And I said that wasn't the kind of stars I had in mind. I got this book.
It's tough in Brooklyn.
There was a library. It was open. You could go to it. I'm not sure that's the case anymore.
Yeah.
And it said this astonishing thing, absolutely mind-blowing. It said that the sun was a star. It really was. That the stars were suns, but immensely distant. And the universe just opened up. And when, maybe years later, I discovered that the Earth was a planet going around the sun, not shining by its own light, and hard to detect because it was so dim. If you had planets around these other stars, you'd never see them. So the idea of the universe filled with planets and who knew life opened up and simply transfixed me. And I vowed I would be an astronomer and try to understand this. And I've been extremely lucky to have had parents who encourage this and to live at just the time.
What a time.
Exploring the
planets. What a time to be an astronomer in terms of manned space, robot space missions, and the advent of, grand unified theory, X-ray telescopes, spectra.
Absolutely. It's a golden age if you want to understand where your planet is in this vast and awesome universe.
What's the most exciting area of astronomy right now for you? And
there's a wide range. I'm personally deeply involved in robotic missions to other worlds, the Voyager missions to the upper solar system, the Galileo spacecraft on its way to Jupiter, and our research group at Cornell has gotten some wonderful results, for example, on organic matter, in a way, the stuff of life in the outer solar system. Beyond my
like what? Well, you haven't found like a milk bottle out there or anything.
But Titan, for example, is the big moon of Saturn. It has a cloud layer that you can't see through, which is made of organic matter. We've duplicated it in the laboratory. It matches everything we know about those clouds. You drop it in water, and you make amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. We think that on some level.
And when you say organic matter, though, what exactly do you mean?
Complex molecules based on carbon.
And you tell that by spectral information, or
there's a sequence of inferential estimates, and involves something called the complex refractive index. But yes, it involves spectral information, and you take the atmosphere of Titan, which we know in the laboratory, irradiate it with charged particles that we know are falling into that atmosphere, and make this funny brownish red powder. whose properties perfectly match the clouds of Titan. And then, as I say, we find out what it's made of, and it's made of the same stuff as us. And so this wonderful possibility that if you want to understand the origin of life, go to the outer solar system and look at what's been building up there over 4.5 billion years.
And what is it that's been building up there? It's not muck from previous civilizations in the way, or previous
No,
life forms
we're
that,
talking
like
about
oil.
we're talking about pre-biological organic matter. After all, when life occurred on Earth, it had to use the existing organic matter. And what was that organic matter? Well, here is at least some leads as to what that was.
Heavy molecules based on carbon, lying around, waiting for energy,
building up for long periods of time. So that's one area, and there's a whole lot of other things. Huge ferment in cosmology, the large-scale structure of the universe.
Some story in the New York Times the other day, the Big Bang may not be the theory.
No, that's just what the headlines say.
That's what
the article didn't say that.
Yeah. You're not worried about the Big Bang.
Well, there's something we don't understand. I mean, the evidence that the universe is expanding is, in my view, still very good. And so 15 or so billion years ago, there was a huge explosion and something happened to start the expansion of the universe. But what is now found is that the largest scale structure of the universe, how are these galaxies distributed, is not at random. It's not chaotic. It's in these immense organized structures in which the galaxies lie on the surface of these huge bubbles. And how can you have such a coherent structure to a universe produced by such an explosion? There's something else happening that we don't understand.
Thank you very much, Carl Sagan.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Carl Sagan, astronomer Carl Sagan. Night Watch continues in a moment.